We're on page 1261. Let's just review where we're up to. The day on which the plotted destruction of the Jewish people was supposed to take place was the 13th of the month of Adar. And a decree went out signed with the king's ring, coming out from Haman, but signed with the king's ring, that all the nations should be on their readiness to slaughter the Jews. Then Esther exposed Haman, and he was killed. And she said to the king, the Jews are in danger. What shall we do about that? And she, I think, feigning ignorance, says, let's write a decree to contradict the first one. Countermand it, so it won't happen. And the king says, I believe this is the sentiment. Listen, poor Esther, you don't know anything about finance or about politics. You don't know how to run a kingdom. No decree that goes out signed by the king can be remanded. And we explain because if you have a big empire, if it was possible for an order that came from the king, which may take 6 weeks to get from the capital to this outpost, if it's possible to contradict it, people who get it say, okay, we received this order from the king, but who knows that next week we'll get a different order. So there was a rule, you cannot contradict the command that comes from the king. King can't do it. Won't be done. You wouldn't believe it if it came. He says, but you write whatever you want. But just don't contradict the first one. Write whatever you want and, engineer it the way whatever you want. So what they write is that on the 13th, a new decree, on the 13th of Adar, the Jews are allowed to defend themselves against their enemies, to kill and spoil and pillage and destroy to their heart's content. That's not a contradiction. The first one said that Goyim can kill Jews, and the second one says that Jews can kill Goyim. That's not a contradiction. They can kill each other. It's only that now the prime minister is Jewish, and the queen is Jewish, and Haman was killed by the king, the great Haman, the famous Haman, and the king said, because he raised his hand against the Jews. So I think that most of the non-Jews in the kingdom are going to think 16 times before they lift their hand against the Jew. They probably have discovered that it's not a safe idea. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah, the first decree is still in force. It said that they can do what they want. What they want is to hide inside. And then it says that the Jews killed their enemies, oivehem, and did to sonehem, those who hate them, as they pleased. An enemy is someone who actively persecutes you. A hater is someone who hates you in his heart, but at least not yet has taken active action to hurt you. So it says, for those who were their enemies, who are acting against them, they killed them. And those who hate them, they did with them as they pleased, meaning, I guess, each case was decided on its merits. That took place on the 13th of Adar, everywhere with one exception. And then on the 14th of Adar, they had relief from those enemies. So there are two events. The successful war in the first place, and then relief from the enemies in the second place. In Shushan, because Esther made a special request, the war was 2 days long, 13th to 14th, and they relief on the 15th. So one of the things to register is that in the rest of the world, Purim is on the 14th of Adar. So what are we celebrating? We're not celebrating the successful war. If we were celebrating the successful war, the celebration would have been on the 13th. We're celebrating the relief that we had from our enemies, which is a result of the successful war. The Meshech Chochmah makes a point of saying that we don't celebrate the downfall of our enemies. We celebrate the relief that we have from them as a result of the downfall. And he brings an instance of this, a very interesting instance. This is in his commentary on the Chumash. Pesach, the holiday of Pesach is 7 days long, and the first day and last day are official complete holidays, and the in-between days are semi-holidays. Now, there is an important historical event that took place on the 7th day of Nisan. 7th day of Nisan was the night and day in which they crossed the sea, and the Egyptians were drowned. Well, that's a holiday. So it says the Mashiach, you might be misled into thinking that we're celebrating the destruction of our enemies, which took place on that day. But that's wrong, he says. And I can prove it to you. Because the command to celebrate the 7th day of Pesach as a holiday was given already in Egypt before they left. So it obviously wasn't created as a commemoration of an event which is going to happen in the future. So he says that's the attitude that we get from the Megillah also. So and they spontaneously celebrated the first year when they had that relief, and then in the future years, what we're going to read about now, that became codified as a permanent celebration. Yeah.
So we talked about before how there were 2 decrees at the beginning. There was one, the public one, that was just like, prepare for the day, it'll be fun. And then there was the secret one that was going to be like the secret police that actually knew what was going to happen. So then how did the rest of the people find out about what actually would be going on the day, and then was the Jewish one also public?
So that's a very good question, and the Megillah actually accounts for that, as I would say, indirectly. What happened in Shushan? In Shushan, the public decree, be ready for 11 months for the 13th of Adar, and we'll tell you later what it's about. That was put up on all the wall posters, right? But Mordechai knew what happened. Mordechai knew. And he went wailing and screaming through the streets. And then he told the other Jews. And the other Jews also went wailing and screaming through the streets. And that attracted attention. So, and it says every place where the king's decree arrived, the Jews knew about it, so it became public knowledge. Against Haman's wish, it became a public knowledge. And I don't know if I explained to you why they did it that way. I think this is the Malbim I'm quoting, because Haman had two fears. Yeah, the king gave me his ring, and yeah, he's behind the whole thing. But kings are fickle; they have different pressures on them, and they change their minds. And his faithful lots, which picked the day 11 months hence. Wow, a lot can happen in 11 months. So on the one hand, he wanted some kind of public knowledge to make it something that couldn't simply disappear. But on the other hand, he was afraid that if it will be publicized, Jews will mobilize whatever leverage they have to try to undo it. 11 months is a long time. Maybe they could use a bribe. Maybe they could use some other kind of trickery. And in fact, in the end, that's what happened. So he split it. He made the public announcement so that everybody in the empire knows the 13th of Adar is going to be special. He can't take that back. He can't cancel that. He can't say, no, we made a mistake, we'll do it in 10 years. That's fixed already. That's irrevocable. And the other part was private, and therefore the Jews wouldn't know about it, and therefore they wouldn't take steps to try to counteract it. That was his plan. But Mordechai knew what it was, and that part of the plan evaporated right away.
I was asking more so from the non-Jew perspective. Okay,
so now when the non-Jews see, and when the decree arrives, and the Jews are all wailing and screaming, we were just making sure to clean out the buggies, so we can go on a trip in the 13th of Adar. And they're wailing and screaming. I wonder what that's about. So it became public knowledge. Okay, so now, on top of 1261, verse 20, Mordechai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, charging them that they should observe annually the 14th and 15th day of Adar as the days on which the Jews gathered relief from their enemies. And the month which had been transformed for them from one of sorrow to gladness, from mourning to a festivity. So here you have an obvious reference and then a somewhat mysterious reference. Yeah, okay, those are the days. The 14th everywhere else in the world, and the 15th on Shushan is when they had relief. And we talked about the walled cities from the time of Joshua. We talked about that last time. Okay, I understand that. You're commemorating the events that took place on those days. And the month. How does the month come in? I mean, every holiday's in a month. It's a date of a month. Does that mean that the month becomes special? The month somehow takes on a different character? You have Hanukkah is the 25th day of Kislev. Doesn't mean the whole month of Kislev becomes different. And indeed, there's a famous halacha in Shulchan Aruch, comes from the Gemara. Mishinichnas Adar, marvin v'simcha. When you go into the month of Adar, you increase rejoicing. That means that the month as a month takes on a certain character. It isn't just that these events took place in the month. And there's a parallel to this on the other side in Av, where you have the 9th of Av, where is the commemoration of the destruction of the first and second temples. And there it says, Mishenichnas Av b'matim b'simcha. The time that you go into the month of Av, we reduce the rejoicing that we have. And the, I would say, legal, sociological perspective here, which people do talk about, is that when the Shulchan Aruch says, when Av starts, you should reduce your rejoicing, it gives you rules. It tells you what to do and what not to do. No weddings, and don't eat meat and don't drink wine, and don't have any voluntary celebrations, and so forth and so on. Rules, how you do it. But when it comes to Adar, when Adar comes, you should increase your rejoicing. No rules at all. You don't have to teach a Jew how to rejoice. You have to teach him how to reduce his joy, to hold back his joy. You have to teach a Jew how to rejoice. So, in both cases, there's a question of the month taking on a certain character. Here it's absolutely explicit. And it means that the month in which this happened wasn't an accident. That's the point. It's not that I have months and then days of the month in order to pick out that one of 365 on which the event takes place. No, the fact that it's in that month has its own separate character. Now, for example, I don't know if I remember I mentioned this to you or not, but when Haman cast lots and he got the month of Adar, he was very happy because he knew that Moses died in the month of Adar. Ah, yes, that's a good month for me to destroy Jews because their great holy leader died in that month. That's the time that I want. Poor Haman didn't know that Moshe was also born in Adar. Oh. Well, I guess that makes it equivocal anyway, because, his being born was good for the Jews and his dying was bad for the Jews. Yeah, but there's another thing, that very holy people end on a whole year. They die on their birthday. So the fact that he died on the 7th of Adar is because he was born on the 7th of Adar, because he was a very holy person, and it was a whole 120 years. And therefore the dying was also a symptom of his greatness, not a symptom of loss or destruction. So he misunderstood the symbolism. But there is symbolism there, that this is a year that's very special. And not only that, you know that the Jewish calendar, in order to adjust the lunar calendar that we have to the seasons which are solar, 7 out of every 19 years we have an extra month, the leap year. I know you have leap days in the American calendar from time to time, 29th of February, but we have leap months, If you do it right. Now, what happens in a leap year? Which month is doubled in a leap year? Adar. The last month of the year, you have it twice. The question arises. In which month should you make Purim? The simple answer is, do it twice! So why do you have to choose? It's a great thing. Do it twice. No, that isn't the right answer. And the Gemara discusses which way it should go. After all, if you have a holiday coming and it's a joyous holiday, don't put it off. So if there are 2 Adars, do it in the first Adar. Why would you wait an extra 4 weeks? But actually, we do it in the second Adar. And the reason is because the next month, Nisan, which is the month of Pesach, is the month of this redemption from Egypt. And Purim is a redemption from death to life. Mismach geula geula, Gemara says, connect the 2 redemptions together. So then, it's again not an accident that it happens in Adar. It happens in Adar in order to make a continuum between the 2 of them. And indeed, I saw it asked, since Nisan has in it Pesach, why don't we have a rule that when you come into Nisan, you should increase your joy? And the answer is, we've been doing that already, and we're not stopping. It flows directly from Adar into Nisan. It doesn't stop. At any rate, so that's something which the Megillah here is hinting to us, that we're supposed to commemorate not only the day on which we had relief, but the month. And what happened in the month? Days which gain, and the month which have been transformed for them from one of sorrow to gladness, from mourning to festivity. They were to observe them as days of feasting and gladness, and for selecting delicacies to one another and gifts to the poor. Usually undertake to continue the practice they had begun, just as Mordechai prescribed to them. So what goes on in this day? Well, feasting and gladness, okay. Gifts to the poor, all right. That's, charity is a gigantic mitzvah in the Torah. And sending delicacies to one another. What's that about? We have a lot of holidays in the year. No other holiday other than Purim has any mitzvah or any custom of sending gifts to people. And here it's codified. You have to send 2 gifts to 2 people. Usually, it's food, and usually contributes to the meal. That's the idea of it. You do it on the day in which you have the meal. I'm saying it's to one person, not to 2 people. Matanas le'avyon has to go to 2 people. So the idea is this. Let's go back. I talked about this maybe a week ago or 10 days ago. What was Haman's complaint that enabled him to convince the king, let's get rid of the Jews? What arguments did he present to the king to get that response from the king? He said the Jews are different from everybody else. They don't keep the laws of any other nation. They violate the king's laws. And also, mefuzar u'meforad. They're scattered and disunified in the empire. They're scattered and disunified. So, we pointed out, every time it says that they defended themselves, it says nikalu. They made themselves into a congregation and defended themselves. Because in order to have the divine help to take revenge against their enemies, they needed to overcome the critique that Haman put on them, which made them vulnerable. And that critique was, you are scattered and disunified. Now, scattered is a geographical term. Disunified means in your relationships to one another, you're disunified. Well, they didn't all gather in the middle of the kingdom, from all over the kingdom, and gather to one geographical spot. But wherever they were, they unified into a congregation of people who mutually respect one another and care for one another and disagree, okay. In families, you have disagreements also. Still, there's a commitment. There's a commitment to one another. So sending gifts is an indication of this kind of unity between people. And this actually is brought out, it's an incident in the Gemara and as codified. What happens if someone's very poor? He can't give gifts, he won't have anything to eat for the meal. Suppose there are two people who are very poor. Guess what they do? They exchange gifts. Exactly right. He said, oh, those Jews, yeah, they always figure a way out. There's no net gain. And so, just a fool's game, You end up, you had to. No. When I'm baking that potato, when I'm frying that egg, I'm frying it for Reuven. Who I have in mind? I have Reuven in mind. I'm going to deliver it to Reuven. And he's doing the same for me. It's not a joke. I was in a yeshiva once. They combined two classes. They went into a classroom. There weren't enough chairs. So he sent out 10 guys to get chairs. And they got them. They came in. They sat down. And the teacher of that school said to them, I would have preferred it if each of you had brought a chair for one of the others, instead of each of you bringing a chair for yourself and sitting down on it. And I read in the biography of the Manchester Rav, many years ago, a little thing that when he would use the washing cup, he would refill it and leave it full for the next person. So I thought, that's a lovely idea. That's a lovely idea. A certain place which I frequent quite regularly, I decided to do it myself. And I found that after a month or two, when I came, I found it full also. Because the average person, if he comes and finds it full, thinks, somebody filled it up, so I don't have to fill it. Well, what am I? Am I just a taker? And then when you fill it up, you're thinking of the next person who's going to use it. So this is a question of expressing and building solidarity between people. And that's one aspect of this idea here of giving delicacies to one another. Now that's, you got a question?
Oh, just with that, I saw someone do this, so I don't mention it. But if you saw the water cup full, would there be a doubt in your mind that part of the water had been used previously to wash someone else's hands, and then there's like a reusing the water for a different mitzvah, or is...
First of all, I'm not sure that that's a problem.
Okay.
Because the part that's left in the cup wasn't used for washing his hands. And if it were legally a problem, I would assume that the person knew what he was doing.
Overnight, if he filled it in the day and nobody used it until the next day, it was left open overnight, then don't we say the Ruach Ra gets in the water or something?
It could be, but that's only if you come very early in the morning. Like 4 in the morning. Otherwise, other people are there at 4 in the morning, and they're the ones who live to few. Yeah, and then gifts to the poor are a matter of social responsibility. Now, it's true, you give your money to one person, but it really is a social responsibility and expresses itself a number of ways. When we had, even in ancient times and in medieval times, when we had our own independent Jewish government, which, by the way, in Europe, in many places, was decided by vote. This is a practice of democracy, which is very rare in Judaism, that the city voted who will be the officers of the city. They had the power to impound property from those from whom it was evaluated that they should give charity up to a certain point, and they could impound their property until they gave out as much charity as possible. So charity is not only a mitzvah, I'm going to say this correctly, it's not only a mitzvah directed at the individual, it's also a responsibility of the community to make sure that that mitzvah gets done. Just like, for example, the sacrifices in the temple, the offerings, I should say, offerings in the temple, only Kohanim can present the offerings, go through the process of presenting them in the temple, but it's not their responsibility. All of the verses in the Torah that direct that the offering should be brought are directed at the Jewish people as a whole. So the Kohanim are just the representatives of the Jewish people who are doing it on their behalf. But it's not their responsibility directly. And the nafkamina will be very simple. Suppose the Kohanim go on and strike. Well, the rest of the people can't tolerate that, because it's the people's responsibility, not their responsibility. Okay, so now that means giving money to the poor. Oh yes, and the application to this, I had a couple of people asked me this recently, so I do want to put it on record. Someone said to me, I'm planning to get married, I'm planning to work in such and such a profession, and I'm planning to have no more children than I can predict that I will be able to support. So I said to him, why? Why is that your decision? He looked at me like I landed from Mars. Because otherwise it's irresponsible. Why should I undertake something that I'm not able to fulfill, especially something that involves other people? So I said to him, from our point of view, you're making a fundamental mistake. The children are not your responsibility alone. They're the responsibility of the community. And if you don't have enough money to care for your children appropriately, other people will give it to you. Every Jewish school is run on a sliding scale of tuition. There's a bar set that's in general, and then there are people who can't pay or only can pay half. And some of the money that from the bar is used to subsidize those who can't pay. And those who are paying what's at the bar know that. And their attitude is, I have enough money not only to educate my own children, but also to contribute for the education of other children. And I'm happy to do that. If that still sounds strange to some of you, and I'm speaking also to the recording, let me introduce you to a bitter fact of life. I'm using economics when I was teaching university, but I don't think it's very different. The average student in university who pays full tuition is paying about 1/3 the cost of his education. 2/3 is charity. He's going with his hand out and getting charity. And the charity is raised by the president of the university, whose job it is to raise millions of dollars to subsidize the university, among other things, or to have an endowment of $50 billion like Harvard. But that's one of the things that's true. You don't pay, especially if you're in the sciences, you don't pay for the laboratories and all the rest of it, but all the rest of it's true as well. You're not paying for it. So don't give yourselves airs that you're living your own life and you're paying your own ways and so on. No, you're taking charity. Now, is there any dishonor in that? No, these people want to have the merit of supporting education. So by your receiving it, you're giving them the opportunity to accomplish what they want to accomplish. That was when education was noble. I won't get started on that. So the same thing's true when you're learning Torah. Same thing's true when the community supports the learning of Torah. Although the Rambam says you shouldn't do it, everybody else is against it. Everybody's against it. Nobody passes like the Rambam in this. At any rate, this is an expression of social responsibility, and those two are two ways of amalgamating the community into a group of the group into a community, which is the opposite of what Haman said was true, that they were divided and disunified. And now, although on the first year that it happened, they did it spontaneously, Mordechai told them to continue it. And now again, as I always say, there's no paragraph break in the Hebrew. Now there's a kind of summary of the content, kind of synopsis of the content of the event. For Haman, son of Abdasa the Agagite, going back to Agag, going back to Amalek, enemy of all the Jews, had plotted to destroy the Jews and cast a pur, that is the lot, we have yet to explain that, to terrify and destroy them. But when she appeared for the king, she appeared before the king. Who?
Esther?
Oh, Esther. I remember that from 2 chapters ago. Yeah, Esther. But why doesn't it say so? Haman is here by name. He commanded the king by means of letters that the wicked scheme which Haman had devised against the Jews should recoil on his own head. And they hanged him and his sons on the gallows. So there's a hint here that Esther, her role throughout was to be hidden. We told you that her name, Esther, the Gemara says, is related to the verse in the Torah, Haster Aster Panai, I will hide my face. And there it doubly uses the verb to hide. And all the time that she was there, she couldn't reveal that she was Jewish. And in the end, she had to reveal that she was Jewish. But at the end of the Megillah, when everyone is saved and everyone is happy and everyone is safe, she remains queen to Ahasuerus. She remains living with him. She bears him a son. The son doesn't grow up as a practicing Jew. I think the story is pretty tough from Esther's point of view. I asked this of many people. The only one who gave me an answer is one of my sons-in-law, Slana Mechosid, who happens to be a gigantic Talmid Chacham. And he said her job was to live with Hester Panim, to live with hiddenness. Even after it's made known that he's a Jew, she couldn't go to Shalom Zochars. She couldn't go to, to Jewish festivals and so forth and so on. She's queen. Living in the palace, has no children who grow up as Jews. No children who grow up as Jews. It's a shocking, but that's her position. That's the so-called the tikkun that she had to make. That's her share in perfecting the potentialities of the world. That's what she had to do. So here it says, Haman, and when she came, that means the hidden one, the one who plays the hidden role. Even when she tells Achashverosh that she's Jewish, he has no clue who she is. She's a prophet. Hello, a prophet. One of the 7 identified women prophets. That puts her on a very, very exalted. I mean, he couldn't imagine in 1,000 years what that means. That was totally hidden from him, totally hidden from the court. That's the way she had to live. She had no room to express who she is with anyone who could appreciate who she is. Yes, she had a chance to associate with Mordechai. He's prime minister, so I'm sure they saw each other often, but no more than that. That's just the hint. So that's the synopsis, so to speak, of what they're supposed to commemorate by these celebrations, and then the Megillah goes out of its way to tell you that is why they call these days Purim, from the word pur. That's like an explanation, but no content whatsoever. Okay, we call it the holiday Purim. Pur is a Persian word. It's not a Hebrew word at all. Im is a plural ending in Hebrew. So it's a hybrid, which doesn't belong to any language at all. Many Purs with the many in a different language. And, okay, so it's the word of the lot. Like, so what? Why would that be the name of the holiday? So there are many explanations here. I'll give you one. Next week, I'll give you a different one. I think it was the Pri Tzaddik who said, all of the holidays that we have are named after the great salvation that took place. Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, is what we offered just before leaving Egypt, and it was where we dedicated our commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and did something which under other circumstances would have been dangerous, and it would give us the merit to leave that night, to leave the land. Shavuos, we counted the weeks, counting up the weeks to receiving of the Torah. Sukkos, we dwell in the sukkah because that's the protection that the clouds of glory gave us when we were in the wilderness. All the holidays are named for the high point of the success of the holiday. Why would you take the name of the lots which Haman cast to decide when to destroy the Jews and make that the name of the holiday? So one answer, I would say, is a slightly bitter answer. The Gemara says, greater was the King Ahasuerus taking off his ring and putting it on the finger of Haman than all the prophecies of the prophets down through the generations. Because all the prophets said, you're failing in these ways, and if you fail, there are going to be these and these disasters, and the Jews didn't turn back. But when Ahasuerus took off the ring and kept it in Haman's hand and sent out the decrees, the Jews did tshuva right away. So you see the effect that it had. Says the Pri Tzaddik, that casting of the lots was the instrument of salvation. That's what did it. They achieved the salvation because they did tshuva, and this is what caused them to do tshuva. So if you look at the way things developed, this was part of the turnabout. This was part of the turnabout of the whole circumstance. Yeah.
Did Esther use her prophecy in the Purim story at all?
Only indirectly, because this is Megillas Esther.
Yeah.
There was some controversy as to whether or not this should be added to the canon, and took place in Chutz La'aretz. There's a whole long story, and she was the one who made the argument that it should be. So I think her status had a lot to do with that. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, so since Esther was taken against her will and forced to marry the king, and she said no, she would have died, since she was married, if she, when seeing Mordechai, engaged in relations with him, would that be halakhically permitted, and is that unethical?
Let's get the first fact straight. There's no such thing as a Jew being married to a non-Jew. There's no such thing. You can be done in a cathedral, and you can have all the liturgy and all the rest of it. There's no such relationship. A Jew can't be married to a non-Jew, period. Just like a Jew can't convert out of Judaism. He can go and get holy water and bathe in the Ganges and whatever he wants. He can't stop being a Jew. There's no such thing as marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. End of story. Doesn't start. You really should have asked the other way. If she was married to Mordechai, what happens when she goes to it? That the Gemara already asks. And there, because she was under the threat of death, she was allowed to do that. Between Rav and Rabbi, the two different explanations of how that works. But there's absolutely no number one. And ethical, you use an interesting word. Whose word is that? And it comes from Greek. You mean, will it sell in Times Square? From our point of view, our ethics are determined by, I didn't say created by, it's a deep subject, are determined by what halacha says. And if Kodesh Baruch Hu says, this is what you should do, then it's what you should do. Okay, so that's one reason why the holiday is named for Purim, but it doesn't quite explain why in the Megillah it says over and over again, Pur hu Garal. It's just to say its relationship to the Garal is something which has to be somehow solidified. We'll talk about that next week, Mr. Hashem. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, because of all they experienced, all that happened to them, the Jews confirmed and undertook upon themselves the posterity, upon all whom might join them, to observe these 2 days without fail in the manner prescribed, the proper time each year. Consequently, these days should be remembered and celebrated by every single generation, family, province, and city. These days of Purim should never cease among the Jews, nor shall the remembrance perish from their descendants. Okay, there's a lot about this, but I don't want to go into it now. Just enough time to go through to the end. Queen Esther, daughter of Avichail, Mordechai the Jew, now her name comes in, wrote with full authority to ratify the second letter of Purim. So above it says that Mordechai recorded these events. But here it says that she wrote it and gave it its authority. Dispatches were sent to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces, the kings of Achashverosh, words of Shalom ve'emes. And this is a very important Jewish theme. These words occur in the Tanakh together very often. And they're together to teach you that each one without the other is defective. In English you have these funny phrases. A cold peace. What does peace mean there? Peace means no bullets are flying, ceasefire, but no friendly relations, no real interconnections between the countries. Certainly plenty of latent hostility. They're just not shooting each other. It's a cold peace. Right? Shalom isn't that. Shalom isn't the cessation of Shalom is a kind of shleimus, a kind of integration, a kind of mutual recognition. Right? But that has to be based on emes. If it isn't based on emes, then it's not real shalom. Look, you have to be considerate of people. And he believes differently from mine. So, sometimes I go to his celebrations, and sometimes he comes to my celebrations. It's just a matter of being considerate, No, that's not shalom. Because that's shalom which compromises your principles. That's not shalom. It's not shalom to compromise your principles. It's shalom to appreciate one another in full recognition that you have different principles. And the principles are contrasting principles. And still to have recognition between them. And the other way around. If you have your principles, but your principles don't dictate hostility, and you're still hostile, then your principles have led you into a wrong position. The principles should be expressed with shalom. But emes and shalom have to go together. And when you have one without the other, it's on the veneer looks very attractive because it's an attractive quality, but it's a big mistake. To establish these days of Purim on the proper dates, Mordechai the Jew and Esther joined them, and as they undertook upon themselves when they started it, their posterity, matter of the fasts and their lamentations. Fasts and lamentations. Well, there's one other performance of Purim, which we haven't mentioned at all up until now, and that is the 13th of Adar, which, like this year in normal years, is a fast day. 13th of Adar is fast day. And there's such a thing as Tanis Esther, the fast of Esther. What's that? Why are we having a fast called the fast of Esther? Now, many people will tell you, well, remember, the whole salvation took place when Esther said, fast for me 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, but that happened only in Shushan, and it happened on the 14th, 15th, and 16th of Nisan, and this is the 13th of Adar. So, I'm not saying it's wrong to say that that's the background, but it's a little disconnected of memory and so on and so on. The Ramban has a different explanation. The Ramban says that when Jews go out to war, especially the Jews this was the whole empire, goes out to war, the people who aren't fighting fast, and often the soldiers fast, because they understand that the success in the war is a matter of your spiritual fitness, not a matter of the straightness of your arrows. You need arrows, and you should make them straight as straight as you can, but that's not what's going to determine the outcome. So the people were fasting. And that's why we fast on the 13th of Adar. Because on the 13th of Adar, there was a fast. And if you look into the liturgy of the day, the special prayers that you say because it's a fast day, you'll see that the content of those prayers is not like the content of the prayers on other fast days. There's no self-accusation, there's no breastbeating, there's no I'm sinful, please don't destroy us, and so on. On the contrary, there's a sense of this is a day in which we made it, we did what was right, we did what was good. It's not mourning at all. On the contrary. This fast recalls their fast. That's how everyone participated in the victory that took place. So that always connects it up better to the actual historical events that take place. I will just go to the end to make one more little point. King Ahasuerus levied taxes upon the mainland and the islands, all his mighty and powerful acts, full account of the greatness of Mordechai, the king promoted, recorded in the books of chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia, which, as I told you at the beginning, makes it sound like the whole book is just a partial biography of Ahasuerus. Mordechai the Jew was viceroy to King Ahasuerus, great man among the Jews, found favor with a multitude of his brethren. The word in Hebrew is rov. It can mean multitude, and it can mean majority. And if you're a Jew, you think, the majority, but there's a minority not, eh? What was their position, and why was it not unified? Sought the good of his people, conserved the welfare of all his posterity. So the Gemara here makes a comment. Mordechai used to be one of the tops of the Sanhedrin. Now he's a prime minister. And there's, in fact, another place where it gives the order of names, and his name is demoted by one. So the minority said, poor Mordechai made a mistake. He shouldn't have become prime minister, giving up that position of the Sanhedrin. He made a mistake. Talmud Torah, especially the Sanhedrin, is more important than that. And people quote that Gemara, and they quote it and draw implications from it and analyze it and so on and so on. But there's a Maharal. And the Maharal says, the way in which you make decisions in Jewish practice is by the majority. Thank you. And the majority favored what he did. The majority were happy with what he did. So that's the norm. The norm is that what Mordechai did, he did was right. The fact that there's a minority can mean to point out that there's another consideration here, and something was lost here, but as a matter of fact, it had to be lost because this was more important. Okay? All right, next week, Sunday and Monday will be Q&A, and then Tuesday and Wednesday I'll talk about the themes of Purim philosophically, and that'll be our preparation for Purim.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.
Have a great job.